Lada Niva, more than just a Soviet off-roader. Born in an era when endurance meant survival, this small but stubborn 4x4 took on the impossible, climbing mountains, crossing deserts, and braving Arctic blizzards. From Siberia to South America, the Niva proved that the toughest vehicles can come from the most unexpected places. In this video, we'll explore the complete story, from its first sketches to conquering roads around the globe. It all began back in 1970, when Alexei Kosygin, chairman of the Council of Ministers of the USSR, was scheduled to pay an official visit to the newly built Lada automobile plant. The plant's management was preparing proposals for discussion on expanding production. One of them at the time was the small car Lada 1101, with a planned annual output of 180,000 units. In addition, Lada's chief designer, Vladimir Solovyov, decided to propose an all-wheel drive vehicle. Ahead of Kosygin's visit, the engineering team was tasked with developing the specifications and technical description of an all-wheel drive vehicle based on components from the Lada 2101. The designers took a day to think over the challenge and then held a brainstorming session. On the most difficult question, body type and drivetrain, they agreed that the car should be a passenger vehicle with an all-metal unibody station wagon design, and also have a simplified van version for transporting agricultural goods. As for the drivetrain, they preferred permanent all-wheel drive with the option of a disconnectable front axle as a last resort. Preliminary calculations showed a possible overload of the transmission, hence the preference for permanent AWD and insufficient engine power, leading to the later use of the Lada 2106 engine. The result was a concept for a highly original passenger car with a permanent differential all-wheel drive system, something with no direct analogs at the time. At the very beginning, the designers saw only two possible ways to create a four-wheel drive car: either to add a driven front axle to an existing passenger car, much like what was done on the Moskvich 410, or to develop a completely new vehicle from scratch, free from the shortcomings of the first approach. The drawbacks of simply modifying a standard car were obvious: increased weight due to the need to reinforce the body, a higher center of gravity that made rollovers more likely, and poor off-road geometry caused by the long overhangs of a regular sedan body. Despite the first option being far easier and cheaper to put into production, the decision was made to create an entirely new model, while reusing as many components from the base Lada as possible. The first sketches of what would become the Niva appeared in January 1971. The official design assignment for a four-seat unibody 4x4 passenger car was issued in the summer of that year, with an unprecedented deadline, just 3 months for the engineering design phase. Because of the tight schedule, the team decided to skip any stylistic or design work and focus entirely on the technical side. By September 1971, the first prototype was already being built in the chief designer's experimental workshop, and on December 25th, the very first bare black body was completed. The early vehicles looked crude: a flat panel, boxy body with a soft top, almost no comfort for the driver or passengers, and, initially, not even a roll bar, which had to be fabricated and installed later during testing. The first prototype was completed and went on trials in April 1972. In total, 2 prototypes were built, both carrying the factory index E2121. Among automotive historians, opinions differ. Some believe these prototypes were little more than test mules used to evaluate the overall layout of the future Niva. Others argue they represented the prevailing vision at the time of what a rural vehicle should look like, and were genuine pre-production prototypes intended for mass manufacturing. Around the same time, both Moskvich and Ij were working on their own off-road vehicles. Moskvich unveiled the prototype 2150, essentially a classic SUV, but with a solid metal roof instead of a canvas one. IJ, on the other hand, presented its own vision of the off-roader of the future. At Lada, however, they were in no hurry to reveal their hand to the competition. To keep things under wraps, the team created a badge for a non-existent brand called Formica, from the Latin for ant, complemented at the front by a red and white Maltese cross. For those who asked too many questions, a set of ready-made excuses was prepared. A Romanian Fiat, a homemade special, or some other equally vague answer. Based on the results of testing the first series of E2121 vehicles, it was decided to continue development. Technically, the new off-roader had proven itself, but its appearance clearly required significant refinement. The task of improving the design was assigned to artist Valery Samushkin. His mission was essentially to follow the original rural off-roader concept, while giving the vehicle a more polished look. However, Samushkin's vision didn't fully align with the brief. In his opinion, the future Niva could also appeal to urban drivers, for trips to the countryside or mushroom picking, while still allowing rural owners to transport goods, even sacks of potatoes. By the end of 1971, a 1:5 scale model of the refined off-roader was completed and ready to present to management. Yet Samushkin felt the work had gone in the wrong direction. Taking a personal risk, he began an alternative project, a vehicle with the same technical specifications, but featuring a comfortable, fully enclosed steel body. In 1972, another 1:5 scale model appeared, one in which the familiar image of the Niva could already be recognized. Unusually for the era, the spare wheel was placed under the hood. There was no room in the trunk, and mounting it on a rear bracket was deemed unaesthetic. The decisive moment came on August 20th, 1972, when a technical council was held to review both models. No one knows how long the meeting lasted, or how many cigarettes were smoked during breaks, but tensions ran high. In the end, Samushkin's vision, strongly supported by Solovyov, won out, though many still clung to the original utilitarian off-roader concept. In essence, August 20th, 1972, can be considered the birthday of the Niva. Before the Niva could enter mass production, it had to undergo a series of rigorous tests. In 1973, the Lada 2E2121, by then almost identical in appearance to the future production model, was sent on a trial run across Central Asia. After this demanding journey, it received headlight washers, a rear wiper, and a tachometer on the dashboard, essential for monitoring engine speed when driving in low-range gears. In 1974, the car was presented for official state trials, and that same year it was given a name, Niva, which was soon trademarked. The origin of the name has several explanations. Official version: NI for Nikolai Ryabtsev, chief designer, V for Vitaly Pustovyot, lead engineer, and A for Anatoly Evtiev, transmission designer. Symbolic version: in Russian, Niva means plowed field or grain field, evoking rural landscapes, open spaces, and the ability to travel where no roads exist. A fitting name for a 4x4. Factory legend: the name came from combining the names of two young girls, Nina and Valentina, the daughters of two key engineers. Whatever the truth, the name was perfect, short, memorable, and easy to pronounce in many languages. Following the Central Asian tests, the prototype was approved for both domestic production and export. Before entering the assembly line, it received further refinements. The rear lights from the Lada 2103 were replaced with those from the 2106, along with its turn signals. The chrome bumper was swapped for an aluminum one, and a second exterior rear-view mirror was added. The first pilot batch of 50 vehicles was sent to different regions for supervised operation. Lada engineers closely monitored them, identifying and fixing several teething problems. By April, 1977. All issues had been resolved. On April 5, 1977, the very first production Niva rolled off the assembly line. By August 30th, the 1,000th car had been built. In total, 5,534 Nivas were produced that year. The production version was fitted with the 1.6-liter, 72-horsepower engine from the Lada 2106. Export of the Niva kicked off in November 1977. The very first shipments went to Finland and Belgium. That same year, Frenchman Jean-Jacques Posch, who had previously worked with Czechoslovakia's Škoda and the Soviet Moskvich, began importing Soviet off-roaders into France. And he didn't just sell them in their stock form. His company also offered eye-catching, custom-styled versions that stood out even more on European roads. In 1978, the Lada Niva reached the United Kingdom, just a year after production began. But it took nearly 5 more years before Lada released a proper right-hand drive version. Until then, British buyers had to put up with the inconvenience of a left-hand drive SUV, something they tolerated mainly thanks to its very attractive price. When the right-hand drive model finally arrived in the mid-1880s, the British market got a special treat, the Lada Niva Cossack. It came with upgraded standard equipment, a 5-speed gearbox instead of the usual 4-speed, developed with help from the British, and improved body damping to reduce vibrations. And for those wanting something truly unique, there was the Cossack Cabrio, a convertible Niva, hand-built by the tuning firm Top Hat Conversions. Once right-hand drive production began, the Niva also set off for Australia, New Zealand, Mozambique, Japan, and even Jamaica. In total, this rugged little 4x4 was exported to over 100 countries. Listing every version and special edition here would take far longer than this video allows, so we'll stick to the highlights. The popularity of the Niva in Western Europe led to 5 Lada off-road vehicles taking part in the inaugural Paris-Dakar rally in 1979, the race that would go on to become a legendary endurance event. Compared to the production versions, the rally-prepared Nivas differed only in having reinforced suspension, an enlarged fuel tank, and a safety roll cage. 2 crews made it to the finish, taking 28th and 42nd place, and since in the first race, the organizers placed all participants in a single category, including motorcyclists. This was a respectable result. Inspired by this success, Jean-Jacques Posch tasked his team of engineers with working on the Niva more seriously. In the 1980 Dakar, the team's promising performance was cut short by an unfortunate mechanical failure, but in 1981 and 1982, the drivers of Lada Posch finished the marathon in 2nd and 3rd place, using off-roaders with a modified 1.8-liter engine producing around 140 horsepower. The first facelift for the Niva came in 1993 and concerned the rear part of the vehicle. The taillights were replaced, not for aesthetics, but to enlarge the tailgate opening, which was already quite small, and the high sill made loading even more difficult. Naturally, such changes required reinforcing the body, since that panel provided significant rigidity to the structure. In addition, the engine displacement was increased to 1.7 liters, and power rose to 81 horsepower. In 1994, Lada began experimenting with stretching the Niva's wheelbase. This resulted in the 2,129th version, known as Kedar. These off-road vehicles were produced in Togliatti from 1994 to 1996 in several variants, and on closer inspection, it becomes clear that all the additional interior space went to the cargo area, since the rear seats remained in the same position as in the standard Niva. One variant even completely omitted the second row of seats, offering a huge cargo compartment instead. This version did not gain much popularity and was produced in very small numbers. However, the developments from the Keter project were used in creating the five-door Niva, introduced in 1995 as the 2131. It was well received by buyers, but the significantly longer wheelbase reduced its off-road capability compared to the standard model. The five-door tended to scrape its underside in places where the three-door would pass easily. In 1995, perhaps the most exotic Niva variant appeared, the Marsh 1 snow and swamp vehicle from the Togliatti-based Bronto company. Interestingly, its trailer was an integral part of the design. Under the hood was the standard 1.7-liter 8-valve engine producing 83 horsepower and 129 newton-meters of torque. This was enough to accelerate the 1,700-kilogram off-roader to 70 kilometers per hour, but the real magic happened off the asphalt. Designed for oil extraction regions and the impassable areas of the north, the vehicle's giant tires allowed it to cross not only puddles, but to perform miracles in the wilderness. Ground clearance reached 480 millimeters. Approach and departure angles were 65 degrees and 75 degrees respectively, and the ground pressure did not exceed 0.2 kilograms per square centimeter, enabling travel over swampy terrain. The Marsh 1 conquered the North Pole twice, in 1999 and 2000, while a regular Lada 2121 has been operating for over 12 years, without major breakdowns at the Bellingshausen Polar Station, carrying and towing loads in extreme temperatures, from 54 degrees Celsius to plus 40 degrees Celsius. The Niva also holds the world record for the highest altitude reached by a car in the 20th century. In 1998, a Russian crew drove to Everest Base Camp at 5,200 meters above sea level. A year later, a Lada 2121 climbed to 5,726 meters on the Tibetan Plateau in the Himalayas. Not all ideas from Togliatti's engineers reached even limited production. Two Niva-based projects remained one-offs. In the mid-1970s, alongside the civilian three-door model, the Lada 2122 Reka amphibious vehicle was developed for the Army. Its most vulnerable components, the transmission and transfer case, were enclosed in a sealed casing, and propulsion in water was provided by the rotating wheels with special tires, allowing speeds of up to 4 kilometers per hour on water. Unfortunately, despite an exceptionally long and thorough development process lasting until 1988, the floating Niva never entered series production. Over 10 years, 27 versions were built, each differing significantly from the others. An even stranger fate awaited the mid-1990s Bora project, a light compact off-roader on the Niva chassis, planned for production in South America and the Middle East. Originally conceived in 1989 as a utilitarian vehicle based on refurbished components from classic Ladas, the collapse of the USSR almost killed the idea. However, in spring 1992, under the direction of Yevgeny Sokolov, the Lada Tech Center began working on Bora. Some believe the project was inspired by a representative of a Moscow firm, who, after visiting several Latin American countries, realized local farmers needed a light four-wheel drive utility vehicle. The idea itself had been floating around at Lada since the 1980s, and similar vehicles, such as the Citroën Méhari, Renault 4 Plein Air, and Austin Mini Moke, were already known worldwide, though most of them, except later Citroëns, were only front-wheel drive. The Bora, based on Niva components, featured a full-time four-wheel drive system, a locking center differential, and low-range gearing. There is a story that Crown Prince Mahmoud Ameri, after test driving the Bora, was so impressed that he wanted to arrange production in the UAE. However, the project was never realized, as in the early 1990s, both Lada and Russia as a whole were going through extremely difficult times, and buggy production was not a priority. Nevertheless, The two prototypes still exist today, one in Russia and the other in the UAE. In 2001, the future of the classic Lada Niva was nearly cut short. The exclusive rights to the Niva trademark were transferred to the GM-Lada joint venture. From that moment on, the familiar three-door model was rebranded as Lada 4x4, while a completely different SUV appeared under the Chevrolet Niva name. We've covered its story on our channel, so be sure to check it out. It wasn't until 2020 that the Niva name returned to Lada, restoring the legendary model's historic identity. Today, production of the Niva continues without interruption, with no signs of slowing down. Alongside the classic version, there are more modern variants, such as the Lada Niva Urban and Bronto. In the European Union, the base Niva starts at €19,000, remaining one of the most affordable and most iconic off-roaders on the market. What is the secret behind the Niva's longevity? And why does it remain popular to this day? Of course, part of the answer lies in its simplicity, reliability, and affordability. But there's also a subtler reason for its success. Many cars eventually lose their identity in endless attempts to look modern. Such facelifts rarely succeed. More often, they only highlight the age of the design and turn the model into a shadow of what it once was. The Niva avoided that trap. It preserved its authentic look and became more than just a vehicle. It became a symbol. Naturally, the 1977 Niva and today's version are not identical. Modern examples offer air conditioning, ABS, heated and more comfortable seats, and many small conveniences. Yet at the same time, the Niva has no oversized touchscreens or flashy gimmicks. On the outside, it remains the same instantly recognizable classic. And perhaps that is the true secret of its phenomenon. The Niva doesn't try to look modern because it has already become a timeless classic.